Hey guys, what is up? I am going to be bringing you a video today that is going to be an explanation of how you should think about pretty much any item you'd want to consider buying as support. So we're going to kind of jump through a lot of items, and I'll just have a little picture on the screen. I'm going to talk about how I think about each item, and this is just to give you an idea of how you should be thinking about each item and what it can do for you or your team. I'm going to have little ratings for how it enables you offensively or defensively, and for your team or for yourself. Don't put too much stock in these ratings. It's just to give you a general idea. I mean, if you disagree, so be it. It's, just to give you an indicator of like how I think about these items. And if you're not sure how to think about some items, maybe this will help you. So just to start with some basic definitions. So what is the basic concept when we're talking about support items? Items as a support should be primarily centered around allowing you to get your spells off. That is the most important thing on support heroes. Support roles, conceptually, you need to get your spells off while having not a lot of gold. What gold you do have needs to ensure that you're not just chain feeding in fights and that you're having some sort of impact. And if support items tend to be more defensive. However, if you're not at huge risk of dying, that opens up offensive capabilities, and you'll have more options there. So to enable yourself offensively, what I mean by that is you need an item that is for yourself, that enables your kit and enables you to get your spells off. And so for most supports, it's like Blink Dagger, right? Like Blink on Earthshaker. You need that item to like kind of get your spells off and have good impact. And if you don't have it, your hero just doesn't work well. And so for most supports, this isn't something you need a lot of itemizing for, but obviously on some it is. And then it's also worth noting that for some defensive items also somewhat enable you offensively in certain scenarios as well. So enabling yourself defensively is just an item that keeps you alive, not super complicated. You buy items like this when you need to just stay alive longer to get spells off. Items that enable your team are items you purchase to amp up your own team by buffing either attack speed, move speed, damage, or providing some lockdown. And then enabling your team defensively are items that keep you alive through heal, save, or blocking damage or spells like Lotus. And for the little point scale I'm going to use, again, don't put way too much emphasis on the numbers. 0 is it doesn't help in that aspect at all, and 5 is it has a huge impact. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the earlier items. These items are not in any particular order other than the first 4, I think, that I'm going to talk about, or more like early game, super early game items, and then beyond that, they're not in any particular order. So if you're looking for a particular one, maybe you skip through the video or whatever. So the first item is Raindrop. This item is super good right now. I'm making this video on August 14th of 2022. I think it's like 7.31D. The Arlington Major just finished. So that's, if these items get changed in the future, so be it. But this is the time that I'm talking about the items in the current state of the game. So Raindrop, I think, is super good on supports. I think you need to buy it in 90% of your games. If you're not buying Raindrop in most of your games, you're doing something wrong. It's so strong. It gives you the passive mana regen. The only time you don't really buy it is if the enemy is all physical or all magic damage over time, like Jakiro or Veno, where the Raindrop's not proccing, or some combination of physical and damage over time. But anytime the enemy has any magic damage nuke, it can trigger a Raindrop. And it's just so value. So buy more Raindrops if you're not buying Raindrops. And just FYI, I'm not going to be talking too much about the numbers either, just because I don't feel like I want to justify the numbers. Like I said, if you don't, it's just to give you an idea of how the item would work. So the next item I want to talk about is Fluffy Hat. Fluffy Hat is a really nice item right now. I think high-level players buy this item a lot more than low-level players do right now. And it's just good if you're poor and you're a squishy hero and you want more survivability. So, I see this on I see pros buy this on a lot of supports right now, like Dazzle, Crystal Maiden. I see like crit on Marcy by like 2 of these. He just has wand, 2 fluffy hats, boots, and like saves for blink, right? It's just to give you that extra burst against like heavy combo. It's really good in conjunction with raindrops, and a lot of times is a squishy support if you're having, as long as you're not way behind, having this like little bit of extra HP, like raindrop plus a fluffy hat, lets you live through like a lot of bursts that you otherwise would be killing you, right? If you're a crystal maiden, you're worried about dying to a tiny combo. If you have a fluffy hat and a raindrop, you're actually surprisingly survivable, especially if you throw in a magic stick or magic wand, which I'll talk about in just a second. Next item is Bassi. I think this item's worth mentioning because in certain scenarios, I think it's very good. And most times, it's probably not that good. But in the times that it is good is when you and your core both heavily utilize mana in lane, and then you don't immediately need any other items to survive. So like if you're not at massive threat of dying, if you don't have like boots or a windlace, and you're like doing okay on regen, and you and your core both use mana, then it's a good time to pick up Basilius. So it's not good to buy, obviously, if you need something else. And it's also not good to buy if your core doesn't really need the mana to lane effectively. So if you're like I picked this up when I'm a Winter Wyvern and I'm with a hero like a Jug, and both of us like really want to utilize that mana, and usually we're good on sustain because Jug like turns mana into healing. So lanes like that, it's pretty good, and you should highly consider it as long as you don't really need something else, depending on what the opponent lane is. And you really shouldn't be picking it up if like your core is like a PL or like a Drow, where like him having that little bit of extra mana isn't really going to change the lane too much. Maybe Drow's a bad example. Drow likes mana, but those are just, it's definitely not an always purchase though, but it's something you should consider, especially in these certain situations. So next, this is my favorite item. You should just always buy Magic Wand. If you're below like 6k, like just buy Magic Wand every game. As a support player, you should be buying it on core almost all the time too, but if you're a support and you're not buying Magic Wand, you're fucking up, just straight up. It's so good. It's 450 gold for the upgrade. I start with it in this patch right now. I start with Stick a lot. In a lot of games, I just start with my starting gold with Magic Stick. It's just so value if spells are being cast in lane. You should always, if you don't need it in the lane, like say you're against like a Slardar, some sort of Slardar off lane where they're not casting a lot of spells, you don't have to buy it right away. But if you don't have a wand, like full wand by like 10 minutes of support, and you're like, if you're like sub 6k, like I said, I think you're just fucking up. Like just buy the wand, guys. It's so good. Nothing more to say on that. Just buy wand. All right, let's talk about Tranquil Boots. So Tranquil Boots, you get a lot of use out of these either if you're a low mana hero, where you don't need mana all the time, or you have some other way of getting mana where like maybe you have raindrops and a Bassi, or maybe you have a certain neutral item. Maybe you are building a soul ring, or like, you've already disassembled your arcanes that you made. Like that's when Tranquils, like a lot of people make Tranquils after that. So there's situations where you kind of want Tranquils, or should look to be getting Tranquils. It's also pretty good when the opponent has like damage over time spells that won't proc the Tranquils. Like things like Jakiro Breathe Fire don't like put your Tranquils on cooldown, I'm pretty sure. Or like Veno. Like Veno Poison doesn't put your Tranquils on cooldown. So in those scenarios, Tranquils is nice. Also if you like need the extra movement speed. So some supports like Tiny or Earthshaker really like that extra movement speed. So it's good to pick them up in those scenarios too. Arcane Boots are the next one. Obviously the other main choice for most supports. Arcanes, obviously, it's like when you're mana dependent and can be really good for your team too. Usually it's more so like, does this hero need the mana or something like that. All right, so next item we're going to talk about is Ghost Scepter. Really only good when the enemy has a lot of physical damage that you need to protect yourself from, but in some scenarios it's like a must buy or you just feed. So you're thinking like Slardar, Phantom Assassin, Night Stalker, sometimes Juggernaut if you're like worried about the Omni Slash, Ursa, Bristle, PL, Spectre, TA, Drow. all these scenarios, Ghost Scepter can be pretty good. You should be able to tell if you're dying to like only physical damage, and those are the scenarios where you need this item. All right, the next item is Veil. Veil is not very popular in this patch, but it's good when your team has high magic damage and you're kind of ahead after the lanes. It's not really good to buy if you're like struggling, or even if like some of your other lanes are struggling. Generally, like a more defensive item will be preferable. But in some scenarios, if you're like winning and you guys do a lot of magic damage, like you have a Sand King, you have a Sky Wrath, you know, you have a Lina, something that's pumping out a lot of magic damage, it can be pretty good. Drums of Endurance, I really like this item right now. You really want to get it when you're not particularly worried about dying. So whether your positioning is good or they don't have a lot of backline jump or whatever, I think it's a really good item in this patch. Your cores get a lot out of the move speed and attack speed, and it's good against enemy cores who have a hard time dealing with high physical damage. So like if they have an anti-mage who, you know, what anti-mage doesn't want is for a bunch of people to start attacking him when he comes in, right? So if you have drums, it can like help in that scenario. It's bad, obviously, if you have mostly magic damage cores who aren't going to be getting a lot out of the active. All right, the next item we're going to talk about is Glimmer Cape. Really good when the enemy has high magic damage, obviously. Standouts on this item is if you're against like Morphling, Necro, Lesh, Ember, decent against like Storm 2 or Void Spirit. Any of these like super high magic damage cores. Sand King, really good against all these heroes. And obviously it's bad if the enemy is mostly physical damage. You want to be looking for some other option. You know, Ghost Scepter, Force Staff, whatever. Okay, so Force Staff is a complicated item, I think. It's obviously good, right? Pros buy it all the time. And it's like, is it going to be as good in your pub as it is in pro games? The way you should think about this item, or the way I think about this item, is it's good when the enemy does not have continuous chase and they're like dependent on getting top of you and staying on top of you to kill you or your cores. So it's really good against heroes like Ursa, Monkey King, Medusa, Drow, Dawnbreaker, like Razor, Arc Warden, you know, maybe a Nature's Prophet. It's really good against Invoker in particular, I found. Like, it just kind of counters everything Invoker wants to do. So it's really good against heroes like this. Hopefully you can see what I mean, right? It's not good against like a Storm, who if you Force Staff, he's just going to keep chasing you. So it's bad when specifically against those kinds of heroes, and that's when you really don't want to be looking to get it. So some examples of heroes that are going to keep chasing you even after you Force Staff is like a Night Stalker. I already mentioned Storm, like Puck, Ember, Earth Spirit, Void Spirit, Bloodseeker, Bristle, Faceless Void, Bat Rider, heroes with blinks like Phantom Assassin or Anti-Mage. Against these kinds of heroes, it's not that helpful. They just keep chasing you, and then it's just not a good use of the gold. So that's how I think about Force Staff. Hopefully that's helpful, because I think it's a hard item to conceptualize. Like, when do I get this? When do I not get this? So next item, it's a fan favorite, Blink Dagger. So a couple of scenarios where this is really good. Obviously, this is only enabling you and your kit. So it's best when you have vital saves or crucial teamfight ultimates or disables. So some examples of heroes this would apply to is Winter Wyvern, Earthshaker, Oracle sometimes, Warlock sometimes, heroes like Lion or Shaman, Enigma. And it's also good in like scenarios where you need to be positioned so far back that like their backline jumpers like won't find you. So like against heroes like Ember can be really good. I specifically bought Blink like second item once on a Warlock when they had like a Morphling and like an Ember, and I was like, well, if I can't just stand behind my team because they'll just jump me and I'll die, right? So I needed to be way back, and Blink allows you to be way back and then still get into the correct position to like cast a crucial spell. It can also be sort of okay on heroes where your cast range on your abilities really sucks. Kind of like Witch Doctor or Ogre. Sometimes, like, if your stun is really crucial or getting your combo off is kind of crucial and your cast range is just terrible, Blink can kind of be a consideration in that scenario. Obviously, not good when your team needs other items and you don't need your spells to like you're already getting your important spells off like without a blink. So the next item we're going to talk about is Aether Lens. Obviously good when you need extra range to get your important spells off and you can stay well positioned. So Aether Lens is really good when the enemy has abilities that threaten you a lot, but they don't really jump the backline with them, so you just need to stay far enough back to where you're not in range. So, you know, if the enemy has like a Chaos Knight or a Bristleback, like these heroes aren't necessarily going to be jumping your backlines usually, but, you know, you have to stay far enough away from them so that they don't get on top of you, because if they do, then you're pretty much dead. And it's obviously not good if the opponent has backline support hunting heroes like Puck, Void Spirit, Ember, like kind of all these spirit heroes or Puck. If they're going to get on top of you no matter what, Aether Lens is not a good pickup, because it doesn't matter if you're like 200 range further away if they're going to get on top of you anyways. It's like not a good use of the gold. Next item we're going to talk about is Holy Locket. Holy Locket is just a really nice healing amp item. Obviously, it's only good if you're already healing for the most part, and I usually only pick it up when I don't need any other particular defensive item to like survive the fights. So you kind of have to gauge how it's going and whether I need any of these other items that I'm talking about. And if you don't, then Holy Locket can be a really nice pickup if you think that it sustains value. So like Warlock, Io, Chen. I like to get it on Undying sometimes. It can be nice. So it really depends on what's going on, but if you need it, it's usually not best to purchase like over some other defensive item if you're having survivability issues. So the next item we're going to talk about is Yule's Scepter. Pretty much only, it's very expensive right now. This item's been nerfed a lot over the last like year or two in terms of like cost. So it's really only good if the enemy has really high value Yule's targets like Ursa or Troll, or if you need it to set up your own hard to hit abilities because your team doesn't have a lot of setup. So like if you're like a Lina or a Jakiro or a Mirana and your team has like almost no setup and you really need to land like your disables, Yule's is a decent option for that. Otherwise, I really don't pick it up. I hardly ever pick up this item right now unless I'm against like an Ursa or a Troll or something. I don't think it's that good right now, honestly. Next item is Rod of Atos. I almost never get this item either. It's really only good if your team has like no other lockdown or disable, and you also have spells that need setup. It's kind of you should think about this as like only if I absolutely need this item, and you kind of have to be desperate to like disable them to buy this item. Otherwise, you shouldn't be buying it. If there are any other decent options, or if you have like other stuns or disables on your team, you should not be looking at this item. Next item we're going to talk about is Aeon Disc. This is really good when the enemy has reliable ways to find you and instantly kill you, and you have very important spells. So like if you're a Warlock and you're against like a Spectre, or against like a Storm who's going to be jumping you, it can be really good in that sense. It's also typically more useful if you have some way to get away from like whoever's going on you after it procs. So like if they have like heroes that are going to keep chasing you after the Aeon procs, it's like not that great. I actually mentioned Storm already, but it's actually not that good against Storm usually, because he'll jump you, proc it, and then he can like 3 seconds later he can like find you again. So it's usually bought against like high burst heroes like Tiny or Faceless Void. So like I said, it's not good when the enemy can easily stay on top of you, or if the enemy just has no backline burst, because then you don't need it, right? So the next item is Pipe. This item's not in a good spot right now just because it's so expensive. It should really only be considered if the enemy has really high AoE magic damage and your team like kind of desperately needs that extra survivability. Otherwise, Glimmer is like, I would say Glimmer is favored in like 80 to 90% of scenarios. But if the enemy has a lot of AoE magic damage, like they have Zeus, they have Veno, they have Earthshaker, you know, maybe then you like pick up a Pipe. Pretty situational right now though, it's so expensive. The next item is Lotus. Lotus is also pretty expensive, but it's got a bit more utility than like something like Pipe. So sometimes it's just really important. If the enemy has lots of high target or high impact single target spells. Obviously, Lotus is nice. Buying on a support is pretty tough, but you can consider it if, you know, their main team fighting is like a Doom or something like that, or Lasso from Batrider. If those are like their main fighting spells, that's when Lotus is like super important, and you can maybe rush it at the expense of other items. Next item is Boots of Bearing. I find this upgrade to be very expensive right now, like the recipe after the Tranquil and Drum separately is pretty expensive. The active can be really nice if the enemy has a lot of slows. Otherwise, I only upgrade if I already have like the Tranquils and like I'm out of normal drum charges, and usually if I'm like running out of slots otherwise. I don't upgrade this a lot. It is pretty expensive right now, but it's not terrible. So the next is the Medallion / Solar Crest. This item isn't in a great spot right now, but it's not terrible. I just find it's very situational at this point. It's best when you have cores that are mostly physical damage, and best when you already have like disables on your team, where when you use the Solar or the Medallion, it really allows your team to like, your team's gonna be able to like hit the targets, right? I typically buy it right now when I have cores like Legion Commander or Slardar, where I know they're gonna be like hitting their targets. It also can be good as a way to open up Roshan to your team if you have a pretty bad Roshan lineup. Obviously not good if your guys are like mostly magic damage or something. And I consider this an offensive item. Even if you're using it on your ally, it's usually in an offensive sense. Like, you wouldn't buy this item just to like temporarily defensively give your teammate like 5 armor. Like, that's not why you want to buy the item, right? That's not what it's good. The next combo of items is going to be the Mech Greaves. Really good when the enemy has initial burst, but not a lot of sustained damage. And will also be effective. To me, it's kind of like, if I don't need any other defensive item in particular, then sometimes I'll go look to buy this just as a nice heal that affects the whole team. And you know, you're like, I don't need Glimmer really, I don't need Force really, I don't need Ghost Scepter really, and I still want to like somehow positively impact my team. It can still be a nice item to pick up there. It's also a nice item to pick up when your hero's kit in whatever game you happen to be in is like kind of useless. So if you're finding that you're having like very little impact with your spells, like it happens sometimes, you're hard countered, whatever, you can just pick up a Mech or Greaves, and then you have some impact. Even if it's not with your spells, like healing your team and providing mana will always be like good. So in those scenarios, it can be okay as well. The next is Vlad's and Wraith Pact. Wraith Pact is kind of a busted item right now. It was more busted before the most recent nerf. It's still really, really good. It's mostly offensive. It's only slightly defensive. And it's good when your cores are mostly physical damage because it amps like attack damage. And if you don't need any defensive items for yourself. But otherwise, it's a very high team impact item right now. So pretty nice to pick up right now if you don't need some other defensive item to like not just feed. Next is the Urn or Vessel. So it's really good for early aggression, like the Urn itself. If you anticipate getting early kills, it can be really nice to pick up in lane. And Vessel, the upgrade, I find is really only worth it right now if the enemy has like specific heroes that are countered by the Vessel, like Necro, Bristle, Morph, Timber. Obviously upgrade to the Vessel. If they don't have one of those heroes, I really don't find the upgrade to be that valuable right now. And like, I would favor, like, you could still pick up an Urn. Like sometimes when I'm playing Mirana, right, and they don't have a hero that I need to Vessel, I'll build the Urn anyways, and then I'll go for like drums or like Wraith Pact or something like that. Also, it's important to note that while those scenarios like apply to pick when to pick up this item, it's really actually bad to pick it up if the enemy has a bunch of easy dispels. So like if the enemy has a Legion Commander or an Abaddon or an Oracle, or they're like a Slark or a Jug or a Life Sealer, where they can just easily purge this off, it's usually not good to pick this up. Like if they're going to just instantly dispel it, it's usually just not worth the pickup. So like even if they do have like a really good hero that it's good to Vessel against, sometimes it's kind of not even worth it if they also have an Abaddon who's just going to purge it, right? So consider that in the purchase as well. And the last item we are going to talk about is BKB. not commonly bought on most supports, but in some cases, especially with heroes with channels, it can be really value in like making sure that you get your full disable off. So Enigma, Witch Doctor, Bane, Shadow Shaman, Black King Bar should be a consideration in some scenarios. If you find you're getting your spells off fine without it, great. But, you know, there will be these scenarios where you're like, wow, I'm like never getting my channeled spell off and I really need to. And you should consider BKB in those scenarios, assuming you think the game will go on long enough for you to like complete the item, since it is pretty expensive. So that is the end. That's all the items. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any specific questions, you can let me know in the comments. I'm going to do a partner video to this where I go through some specific games of mine and talk about the item choices I made and why. I'm not going to be able to like cover examples of every item I just talked about, but if you watch that in conjunction with this video, hopefully that'll give you a solid edge in thinking about items and improving how you think about items in your own games. With that, thanks for watching, cue outro. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you're interested in more of my content, please sub to my channel. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment and I usually respond to them. If you're interested in my coaching, check out the link to my Discord in the video description and you can hit me up for coaching. I've got all the information there on how to sign up, and I'll see you in the next video.